Brenda, you're on camera. She's like, I don't know what that means. Okay, time for Ghibli. Today we are going to be, or I am going to be talking about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which came out in 1984. This is the second in the Studio Ghibli / Miyazaki movies that I will be doing. Yes, I'm aware that Castle of Cagliostro is, of course, the previous one that I did is not technically under the title of Studio Ghibli, but, it's been subsequently released in association with it because of the fact that Miyazaki directed it. I also think that Miyazaki directed another Lupin the Third movie, but I'm not sure. And then, of course, we have Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which is the first time where Miyazaki gets to, direct and, write and everything the movie himself, where it is his own original characters and original concept and everything like that. Not that, post-apocalyptic, hellscape of a universe, of a world, because of mankind's own hubris, ignored understanding of the way the world should work, isn't a typical thing when it comes to anime or science fiction in general. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, as I said, is the first time that Miyazaki gets to fully be in charge of it. So one of the things in the development of the movie is that when he had first pitched the story, which part of the development is also, Nausicaa is also kind of where he starts meeting one of the other members that were part of the founding of Studio Ghibli and stuff like that. Nausicaa is kind of a part of that. It's like through the development of Nausicaa is how they did end up forming Studio Ghibli later on, that then led into Castle in the Sky and all of the other ones. And there's actually on the Nausicaa DVD that I have, they actually have a very good documentary about it. That goes throughout the history and explains the history of Studio Ghibli much better than I can. But with Nausicaa itself, they had gone to one of the other production companies to be like, hey, we want to make this movie and this is what it's going to be about. And they're like, no, as much as the story might be interesting, there's not really a comic or a manga, as they are called, that can be used to promote it. So Miyazaki wrote the manga for Nausicaa, and they got published in a magazine called Animage. And I don't know exactly how many chapters there are. I think there's 7 or 8. I've seen a lot of the different artwork from them, and I'm actually going to use some of the different artwork from the manga and from the art book and stuff like that throughout the video, along with stuff from the movie, just because they're beautifully drawn. And I would love to have an art book of them, but I don't. That applies to a lot of the Studio Ghibli movies. Is would like art book for them. Do I not? I do not have it though. But also applies to One Piece and so many other stuff. And Sailor Moon and Card Captors and take your pick. But one of the things that happened is, of course, they do the manga and the anime magazine, and it ends up being very, very popular. And they end up, okay, well, now you got the backing for the movie, and then they adapt the story that's in the manga into the movie. Obviously, as with any adaptation, as we recently saw with One Piece live action, there's stuff that has to be adjusted throughout the course of the thing. Admittedly, taking a 7-8 chapter thing that are pretty decently sized chapters, in all honesty, and translating that into a movie is a bit less of cutting and snipping here and there than taking, One Piece and turning it into a live action. But they do that and they start working on it. Fun fact when it comes to Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I am fairly certain that Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is actually the first Studio Ghibli movie I ever saw. And I'm pretty sure it was, it was just one of the things that get run on Cartoon Network, back in the early 2000s, probably very shortly after it was released into English, because I'm basically going to be going off the English Disney version that was in 2005. So, I mean, I guess there's a possibility I saw the earlier one that was dubbed in 1985. That was like the original English dub of it, but I'm not sure. But I am mostly familiar with the 2005 one, with Patrick Stewart and Alison Lohan and blah, 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 blah. That is the main one that I am associated with. So I probably saw the original English dub that was done in like 1985 at some point when they aired it on Cartoon Network. And then later on, once I got much more into Miyazaki, that's where I, this one is the one that I associate more with that. But I don't think it's not the one that I have the strongest memory of watching, and that's Spirited Away, because, and I'll remind this again when I get to Spirited Away when I review that. On the day that my niece was born, my older niece was born, who is now 20. God help me. It makes me feel old. Who is now 20. On the day that she was born, what happened was, we got the call in the morning that, oh, my sister's gone into labor, so we're going to go to the hospital, and we don't know how long we're going to be at the hospital. And there was a movie rental place here in Lincoln called Audio Visual, and we went there, and they had this thing where you could get 5 movies for 5 days for $5. And we got like a bunch of VHS, and one of the ones that I had gotten was Spirited Away, which I think I'd watched before, and I really, really liked it, so we got that one as one of them, and a couple of the other ones. I don't remember what they were. Probably some other Disney or DreamWorks at that point in time. Those were in 2003. And we got to the hospital, and I think I watched Spirited Away on kind of a loop on like the little, TV VCR combo thing that they had in like one of the waiting areas in the maternity ward while my sister went through labor. So that's kind of what I associate with that. But going into the actual story of Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. So, the way that it kind of starts is we get this, thing where we see this guy roaming around on these two, what look like kind of like giant cassowaries, but they also just look like chocobos from, like black chocobos from, Final Fantasy. Roaming around on them, and they're all wearing masks, and we see this like very, post-apocalyptic, not hellscape, but like all these, villages and stuff that have been overtaken by all these very toxic and nauseous plants and stuff like that, and all of these giant insects that we see flying around. And we see all of this, and then we get kind of this caption that is like, oh, 1,000 years ago, the world burned for 7 days, for the 7 days of fire, and 1,000 years have passed since then, and there was like this apocalyptic war that destroyed human civilization, and most of the Earth's organic ecosystem was just destroyed, and humanity was scattered all over the world, and basically just like, not a lot of technology had survived and everything, and we get kind of this, the opening credit sequence, we get to see like this different depictions of stuff that happened during that time frame. We get, what look like tapestries that have been, sewn to like show the story of what happened during the time frame during this, horrible apocalyptic 7 days of fire event that gets referenced and everything. And we see a bunch of that, and it's just beautifully done. And we get some of this more animated stuff where we get to see some of these giant fire-looking demon things walking around, and giant insects that attacked the cities and destroyed the cities and things like that. So we get to see a bunch of that stuff depicted in this beginning of it to give us like a quick backstory of what happened. And from there, we are introduced to the character that's Lord Yupa, who is one of the main characters in the show. And he's like going through these villages and like looking and seeing that like so many of these villages have just died and, have been consumed by the toxic jungle, as it's referred to as. And he keeps going. And then we are introduced to the character of Nausicaä, who is, of course, the title character of the movie and the main character of the movie. And what happens is we see her flying around on this glider thing, and outside of this desert area that turns into this giant toxic forest. And she goes into the toxic jungle, and she has like this, helmet and mask on that are clearly filtering out. That are clearly filtering out the pollen, so she's not inhaling it. Hi, baby girl. Brenda's getting a crash course on Miyazaki very quickly after we get her, aren't you? You're getting a crash course on Miyazaki movies. And what happens is, throughout the course of, we see her going through the jungle and everything, and just kind of, not really bothering anything, just kind of looking around. We see her take like a pollen sample from like one of the different, probably very, very toxic plants. We see her take that, and then we see her find this giant freaking discarded, shed shell of an ohm. Ohms are these giant, they're armored caterpillar-like insects is kind of what they're described as. And they're very intelligent. They're like huge. Like they're bigger than... Did the wand fall? I'm sorry if it scared you, baby girl. Okay. And the ohm are just these huge freaking creatures. Just think like cicadas that are just like so freaking big. They're bigger than most houses. And it shed this shell, and it's this giant, slightly transparent shell that she works her way around, and she goes up to the top of it, and she ends up using her dagger and, gunpowder to extract, like, the shell that is part of the eye and everything. Very carefully and everything. And she's not doing it to, like, desecrate it. She's like, oh, this, this type of material will be very good for the people in her valley to use, because she's their princess, and she's like, okay, I want to make sure that my people can be provided for. They can use this giant ohm shell to make tools and everything like that, because the ohm shells are very, very durable. We see her, remove the giant, the eye cover, and then we see that the forest, starts to release spores, and she just kind of sits there and relaxes while she looks at it. But she's also like, yeah, it's a good thing I have my mask on. If I didn't, these spores would kill me in like 5 minutes, and everything if I inhaled them. And then we get this commotion that happens, and Nausicaä seems to be able to sense this commotion before it starts. And then we start hearing, all of this, the shaking and all of this, loud noise. And she runs out of the area through the forest, past a bunch of these other insects that really don't seem to mind her. She accidentally steps on one of the giant ones, and she says sorry and goes on, and it doesn't care. And then she notices she has climbed up to the top of one of these, it basically looks like the giant head of like some ancient giant. And she looks through it, and she sees that, there's an ohm chasing someone. She sends up flares to draw them near her so she can try to help them. And she makes her way out. She gets on her glider. She finds, it's revealed that it is Lord Yupa. We don't have his name yet at that point in time, but it's Lord Yupa. It's the guy we saw earlier, and he's being chased by an ohm. That's probably the one that discarded the shell, as she points out. And she ends up calming the ohm. The ohm is just outraged because something happened with Lord Yupa, and it's just outraged because, it thinks Lord Yupa is trying to hurt the forest and hurt the other ohm and hurt the other insects and everything like that, because the ohms are the guardians of the forest. And while there are other huge freaking insects in the forest, this forest would be just not a good place for me to go, for a decent amount of reasons. Thank God we don't see any giant freaking spiders in this movie. Oh, thank God. God, no. If that was the case, I'd be like, nope, I am not going in that forest. I don't care what is in that forest. You cannot make me go in there. But she ends up, and the ohm's eyes are just red with rage, as they refer to it. The ohm's eye, they see the rage in the ohm. And Nausicaä is able to calm it by using flash grenades, to just blind it and like make it, stop and pause for a short bit of time to make it calm down. The flash grenades don't actually hurt it. She calms it with like flash grenades, and then she uses what's called an insect charm or an insect jar. That is just one of these like charm thing she has that she can, like, swing around and it makes this noise that, like, connects with the insects. And then she kind of has this uncanny ability to be able to connect with the insects and other animals as well. And she ends up, she calms the Gnome down and wakes it up, and it, kind of just, calms down, and, it heads back to the forest and everything. And then she, goes and she reunites with Lord Yupa, who is someone that she has known for most likely her entire life. And he's very happy to see her and everything. And, he thanks her for saving him. And then what happens is, they end up finding out why he got attacked. And it was because he rescued this little tiny fox squirrel that she ends up calling Tato later on. She nicknames it, Nausicaa nicknames it Tato, but it's this little cat-like creature. Well, it's a fox squirrel is what it's referred to as, and I want one. I really want one. It's so adorable and so cute. And I've never been able to actually find a stuffed version of one. I have a stuffed Totoro downstairs, but I don't have any stuffed fox squirrels. That might be something I want to look into at some point in time, is to get one. But Nausicaa ends up connecting with the fox squirrel, and what happens is it's very riled up and everything. And Yupa explains it was like, well, I was trying to save it because I thought it was a baby human. A human child that was being carried away by an insect. It wasn't, it was this, and that's why the insects got mad at me, because I was trying to save the baby. And she's like, oh, well, that makes sense. And the fox squirrel is just kind of like not having a good time. It's very, angry and riled up. And Nausicaa tries to calm it down, and it bites her. And she barely flinches, and she just like lets it sit there, and like realizing that she's not a threat to it. And it calms down, and it does a little thing where it's like it bit her finger, and then it just like licks it because it's sorry. And then it just like, the squirrel bonds with Nausicaa, and after that, Nausicaa and Yupa make their way back to the Valley of the Wind. Nausicaa explains that her father, unfortunately, can't fly anymore. It's kind of, her father is obviously the king of the valley, King Jil, and there is a sickness that comes with living too close to where the toxic jungle is. Even if you are in protected areas, and even if you have like the wind at your back from the sea, like the people of the Valley of the Wind do, where they have like the wind to help keep away most of the pollen, you're still going to end up inhaling bits of the pollen throughout the course of your life. And, there's this, a disease that comes with it that can eventually kind of, paralyze you, or make it that you're not able to walk very well, and it makes your hands, hard like rock, and such. And her father is unable to fly anymore. And it seems to be that the people of the Valley of the Wind all have this like connection with the wind, that they are so used to the wind, and they grow up around it, and, they've lived I think it stated later on that they've lived in the valley for like 300 years. And they have this connection with the forest, and with, with their own forest, and with the wind and everything like that. And Nausicaa is able to read the wind very, very well. And others demonstrate that type of ability as well. It's not just Nausicaa. But what ends up happening is Nausicaa and Yupa make their way back to the village, and everyone in the village is just very happy to see Lord Yupa, and they're all just, they're all ecstatic and everything like that. And like we get to see like the huge range of this valley and this village and everything like that, and how much the people respect Lord Yupa, but not out of like fear, but because of how, we find out later on that he's this amazing fighter and everything. And later on we see, throughout the course of the movie, we see how much Nausicaa and her father are respected and loved by the people of the valley. And we get, throughout the course of the movie, we also get these different demonstrations of what different types of royalty and leaders are capable of, and how they interact with their people, which kind of fits in with a little bit fits in with like the royalty and rulers that I'm doing in One Piece, and leaders that I'm doing in One Piece. But like we get this demonstration between like 3 different kingdoms throughout the course of this movie of how different, rulers interact with their people. And like, we see how happy everybody's, for Lord Yupa to return and everything. And, the valley isn't like this huge over the top kingdom. It's, a very close knit community, and everything. And like, like maybe you don't know the name of like every single person in the valley, but you know the names of most of them, or you probably at least know like the family that they come from. Um, And, we get back to the village and we see that Nausicaä is helping like repair one of the windmills. So, again, this is, her being a princess, but she's also, helping her people and not afraid to get her hands dirty in this regard. She went and found the Ohm shell that, will provide, um, supplies for her people down the line and everything like that. And so she wants to provide for her people. We find, we get, a little bit more of this moment where it's just like, oh, we had a baby born in the valley this year. And, he's like, oh, she looks very strong. And, it's like, Lord Yupa, will you give her a name? And he's like, I'll, come up with a name. And we meet this other character, Mito, who is he's kind of like Nausicaa's guardian. We don't know. I don't think he has any relation at all to like the king or to Lord Yupa or to Nausicaä. He just seems to be one of the other people in the village that is like of a decent enough rank that he kind of helps keep an eye on Nausicaä, since King Jiel isn't really able to leave his bed anymore. And he kind of like bemoans the fact a little bit that like Nausicaä is like this very rebellious and goes out and looks for, Ohm shells and everything like that. So we have those moments there, which are just adorable to see the relationship between those characters and just how, close knit the community is and how close knit the valley is. That night there's this, kind of a big celebration to welcome back Lord Yupa, and he's, eating with Nausicaä and her father, and with Yubaba, who is the Obaba, not Yubaba, that's Spirited Away. Obaba, who is like kind of the village wise woman, soothsayer type thing. And we find out that, the reason that Lord Yupa is on this journey is because he's supposedly looking for someone. This warrior, or this hero that is supposed to return after 1,000 years. And it is revealed, Obaba is like, oh, up on this tapestry, in the corner of the tapestry, there's this figure depicted wearing blue and on a field of gold. And that after 1,000 years, he will return clad in blue and surrounded by fields of gold. And it will be like he will usher in like this new age type of a thing. This, humanity has gone through all of this stuff since, the 7 days of fire, and now he is to return. We don't find out if this is actually supposed to be like a real person that is now being like reincarnated, or like a version of them is being brought back. It's just this, old god type of a thing, or old warrior type thing. But, Nausicaä is, kind of interested in that and everything. And we see the way that she interacts with her father and Obaba and with, Yupa and everything. So we get to see all those. And then that night, there ends up being this moment where, they detect something in the wind. Because, as I said, Nausicaä is not the only one that can detect stuff in the wind. Obaba, shows this. So do several of the other villagers. So does Nausicaä. And so it's not like this uncommon thing, or it's not like this weird thing that just Nausicaä can do. It's like others can do it as well, because they're very used to like reading the wind. It's like wayfinding, when like in Moana, where it's like you can learn how to do it. You can learn how to wayfind very easily, or not easily, but with enough training and with enough practice and everything. Probably the same thing would happen when it comes to like reading the wind, and particularly if it's something you've been doing your entire life. What ends up happening is there ends up being this giant ship that looks, like a giant version of like a transport ship that looks like a giant version of like a B-52, but much bigger, shows up, and it ends up crashing into the valley. Nausicaä tries to stop it from crashing, and it still crashes, unfortunately, and pretty much everyone on board seems to die, and everything is burning. And she ends up finding this girl in the wreckage. Ends up being, it's revealed that her name is Princess Listel of the Kingdom of Pegite, which is just another one of the other kingdoms within the world that Nausicaä is on. Post-apocalyptic world that Nausicaä takes place in. And, Listel is there, and she is very badly injured, unfortunately. Nausicaä tries to do what she can, but she can't really do anything, and she sees that Listel is also chained. Listel asks for the cargo to be burned, and, to destroy everything that's there, which Nausicaä says it's okay, it's already burning, and Listel's like, thank God, and then Listel dies. And then within the wreckage of the plane, there ends up being a giant insect that has survived, and the people of the valley are like, okay, well, we can't kill it because that'll enrage every insect in the forest and the jungle and bring them all here to attack us. So we can't do that. So Nausicaä actually ends up calming it using her insect jar again, and then flies it back to the jungle on her glider. Again, we get to see her making these connections with the insects, very similar to how she calmed down the Ohm, and she flies the giant insect back to the jungle so it's out of the way and it's safe. And then she makes her way back to the village, back to the Valley of the Wind, and we see that they're cleaning up the wreckage, but also they're dealing with other things. One of the things is that they are trying to go through, because the ship itself had been covered in insects, and while most of them died on impact, they also had a ton of spores in the insects, and if those spores take root within their forest and in their crops within the valley, then of course that's going to make those things grow, and then that'll become like a poison jungle right within their home, which is not helpful. So we see the people going through like row by row of all of their crops and all of their forest and area, and burning all of the different spore pods as they can find. It's stated later on that that the valley has learned how to use fire in small controlled bits to be able to get rid of any type of spores and stuff like that make their way into the valley, so that way they don't grow and eventually infect their crops and their jungle or their forest. So we see that. And from there, we also see that they are trying to get rid of the giant pile of, debris and rubble from the ship that crashed. And by ship, I mean like a giant airship that crashed. And they also find that there's this giant frickin' thing that looks like a beating heart. In all honesty, it beats like a heart there within the rubble. Mito tells them to ignore it, and then Yupa and him discuss it, and he's like, on my travels, I heard that there was an ancient warrior from the 7 Days of Fire that had somehow been found underneath the city of Pegite, that had been unearthed from beneath the city of Pegite. And this is where we get like a little bit of a backstory into the world. Again, a little bit of explanation of like what we saw at the beginning of the movie during the title sequence, where it's just like, okay, the giant warriors were these, or god warriors, are also referred to as the giant warriors, were these creatures that had been created and then somehow let loose upon the world. And after 7 Days of Fire, where they burned pretty much the entire world, and where, the Ohm had made their way in, and where they fought against the Ohm, and the Ohm died, and the warriors eventually ended up dying, they all just kind of died and turned to stone. And we see those scattered through different areas. We never get an exact answer as to how many of these giant warriors there were. I'm assuming there was like a huge amount of them if they were able to destroy the world, burn the world so thoroughly back then. We never get an exact answer, but I don't think that that's necessary. We just know that there was one that lay dormant and had survived, and that it was unearthed underneath the city of Pegite. And they're like, okay, well then why was it on a Talmikian ship, which is a different society? And Yupa's like, well, Talmikia is a nation that is very warlike, and The fact that they had a Pegite princess hostage worries him, which is fair enough. Anytime there's hostages involved, you're generally going to be worried. But what ends up happening is, they see that the heart thing is like beating, and they're like, okay, well, we'll leave this alone for now. Unfortunately, during that time frame is when shit kind of goes downhill again. They are actually burying all the dead from Nausicaä that had died on the ship, and probably Listel as well, giving them proper burials. Nausicaä is even helping with this. And during this time frame is when the, more Nausicaän ships show up, and they start attacking the valley. And it's like, okay, this could have been handled so much better on the side of the Nausicaans. And they start rounding up the people of the valley. Nausicaä makes her way to the castle because she realizes that they're after her father. King Gilles is somewhat trying to stand his ground against them. Nausicaä makes her way into the castle. She sees that her father has been killed, and Nausicaä basically goes into like rage mode, berserk mode. And she just like she doesn't even have like a full-on proper weapon. She has like this stick cane thing that she uses, and she just starts slashing and hacking at the different soldiers that are within the room where her father's room, that clearly are the ones that reasons her father is dead. And she like knocks a bunch of them out. I think she actually kills several of them. Knocks the guy that's in charge of them into the wall. And then another group of soldiers shows up. These ones are in armor. She tries to attack them. Her stick breaks. She jumps back. She picks up a sword and starts trying to attack them. And then Lord Yupa pops up and he gets pinned. And it's his intention to do this, is to get pinned between Nausicaä and the soldiers. He ends up with a dagger underneath the helmet of one of the soldiers that's right in the doorway, so he's not going to go anywhere, and he stops Nausicaä, and the tip of her sword actually stabs into Lord Yupa's arm, into his wrist area and everything. And he's trying to defuse the situation, and he's like trying to calm Nausicaä, and it's just like, you must calm yourself. If you fight now, the people of the valley will be slaughtered and everything. You must wait. And he's like, taunting the guards, is like, this ohm tip knife can cut through your armor like it's butter, type of a thing. I'm just like, oh, Lord Yupa, he's the greatest warrior in the land, type of a thing. And then we are introduced to Princess Kushana, who is the princess of the Nausicaän kingdom, and she's the leader of this Nausicaän army, of this part of the Nausicaän army. Played wonderfully by Uma Thurman. And I will be going over the cast later on, or at the end. But she ends up, we're also introduced to the other guy who is there, who is Kuratoa, who is kind of like the guy that was like, technically, I guess, the one that killed Nausicaa's father. I'm not sure. But he's just like, he's very surly, but he's also just like lazy old soldier type of a thing. It's like, I've been in this position for a long time and I ain't moved up, so I'll just do what I can, type of a thing. But he's like very snarky and everything. He's entertaining. And we see all that, and it, Nausicaa ends up, Nausicaa does calm down. She kind of faints and everything after, Lord Yupa kind of like slightly diffuses the situation a little bit. And he like is trying to calm her down. And from there, it is then, Nausicaa is taken out and shown in front of her people to show that she is still alive. The people of the valley have unfortunately had to hand over all of their weapons, their guns and swords and any other types of weapons that they have, or anything else that could be used as weapons, handed them over to the Nausicaans. They surrendered them, and they've been all rounded up. And Nausicaa goes in front of them, and she's like trying to calm them down. And then Kushana comes out, and she explains that with the power of the giant warrior, with the power that she has, between her between Talmekia and, you know, the other kingdoms around Talmekia that it is her intention to unite with, that they intend to burn the forest and to destroy the Ohm and to take back the planet. Obaba points out that this is a stupid plan, or at least a very ill-conceived one, because Obaba points out that that fire has been used before to try to destroy the forest, and all it does is make the Ohm and the insects angry, and that you try burning the forest and the Ohm will come out and attack you, along with other insects will come out and attack you, and when they die, because the Ohm will die until they will fight until they die or until they are calmed down, depending on the circumstances. And when the Ohm die, their shells and their bodies are just full of spores that it just makes the toxic jungle grow out of them as they decompose. And then it just makes more and more of the toxic jungle spread. So it is this very counterproductive thing. As I said, the people of the valley explain later on in the movie that they're like, well, we've learned how to use fire in small amounts to be able to, you know, destroy spores and stuff like that when they end up here. So that way we don't actually destroy our own forest because, well, you know, fire can destroy the forest so quickly, whether it's the toxic jungle or whether it be their own forest, but it takes the wind and the rain 100 years to grow a new forest. You know, the people of the valley are like, we've learned to live in harmony with the jungle as much as possible. We use from the jungle what we can, like what they, you know, from the Ohm shell and things like that, but also they have learned to respect the jungle. And, you know, as opposed to the Talmekians, particularly with Kushana, which we find out why later, that she has a lot of contempt for the jungle and for the insects. And Obaba ends up revealing to the crowd that King Jeel is dead. It's like, you know, it'll be easier for me to, you know, easier for you to kill me, killed an old blind woman, than it was for you to kill our King Jeel. And that's where everybody just starts getting angry about the fact that King Jeel is dead. And like, again, we see the amount of compassion and concern that the people have, that like the people of the valley have for their king and have for Nausicaä and everything. And it's like, you know, he was bedridden, you know, you horrible, you know, how could you, and everything. It's what they're shouting at Kushana and everything. And what ends up happening is Nausicaä actually calms them down. She's able to calm them down fairly easily. Again, this shows this amount of connection that she has with her people, as opposed to Kushana, who is standing up there in this like suit of armor and, you know, golden looking armor and everything, and very intimidating in all honesty, with all of these, you know, soldiers and knights and everything like that around her, and a tank and all of that. You know, and she couldn't really get the people to calm down very easily without threatening them. So we get this difference there. From there, we then have this moment where Kushana is discussing things with Lord Yupa and with Nausicaä and with a few others, and she's like, okay, so I'm going to take Nausicaä and your gunship, because they have like this little gunship in the Valley of the Wind, and I'm going to take, you know, 4 other hostages and supplies, and, you know, 5 other hostages and supplies or whatever, and I'm going to go back to Talmekia and, you know, bring reinforcements or whatever, and, you know, work on that. Well, you guys work on getting, you know, the giant freaking warrior up and running. So that way we can, you know, make this plan succeed. And, like, they try to argue to not take Nausicaä and everything like that. And Nausicaä ends up going, or ends up kind of not volunteering to go, but she agrees to go. And that night we have this moment where Lord Yupa shows up and he wants to talk to Nausicaä, and he makes his way into her room, and she's not there, and he ends up actually following Tato through this like hidden door down through the castle into this like basement area of the castle, where he finds Nausicaä sitting in this room surrounded by all of these different toxic plants, and she does not have a mask on. And he is instantly very concerned, because he's like, what are you doing here? Why are there all these plants, toxic plants and everything here? And she's like, oh, it's okay. They're not toxic anymore. And he's like, he like breathes the air and he's like, they're not. That's weird. And she explains that she irrigates that the soil is from deep below the well, as is the water that she uses to irrigate the room. That Nausicaa made this like little greenhouse room within the castle, and she has collected these different spores and stuff like that from the plants in the jungle when she goes and looks through the jungle, and she brings them back here and she grows them. And he's like, but some of these are the exceedingly toxic ones that I'm familiar with. And she's like, yes, but without the toxic soil, they're not toxic anymore. And he's like, huh. And he's like, how did this all start? And she's like, well, I was trying to find a cure for father's illness, and then this is what happened, and I found all of these, and I ended up growing them. But since I have to leave, since, Nausicaa is now going to go be a prisoner to the Talmekians, she ends up, she has to, she explains to Lord Yupa that it's like, I've already turned off the water. Eventually these plants will wither and die. And, and she makes the question of, one of the translations is, humans polluted the trees of the wasteland of the toxic jungle. They came to be born the toxic jungle came to be born in order to purify the world. Taking the earth's poisons into their bodies, they became pure crystals and died, becoming sand. We see this depicted much later, or a little bit later on in the movie. But Nausicaa is like, how can we, who could have polluted the entire world? Who could have done that? Bit of naivete, but I think it's also like, it's not the question of like, oh my God, who could have done this, when she's like well aware that it was humanity that did it in the first place. But it's also like, who could do that? Who would willingly want to, pollute their entire world and cause all of these problems and everything like that? So it's like, it's that double thing there. And it ends up, Nausicaa, of course, ends up going the next day is when Kushana and Nausicaa and the others head out. Kurotoa is left in charge of the giant, warrior to get it up and running. And like they have the people of the valley helping get like this giant building made to get it waking up. And, what ends up happening is, of course, Nausicaa is sent off. And, again, we get to see these interactions with her and the people. We see these little girls run up and like give her like these little bag of nuts that they've gathered. And, she's very grateful to them. And she's, I'll be back. It's okay. And she's like trying to calm them. And like, they're of course very sad that she's leaving. Again, we get these different depictions of the way she interacts with her people as a way that like Kushana interacts with her people. Once they're all off, we also find out like several of the other hostages. One of the other ones was Mito, and then there's like several of the other old men in the village that had I don't know if they were volunteered to be hostages or if they volunteered themselves, but they go with them as the hostages and such. And they're like complaining in the ship about like, are we there yet? My back hurts. They're like, good Lord, you're annoying. So we get like a little bit of humor there with that. While they're on the Talmekian airship as it flies over the jungle toward Talmekia, or toward Pejed. I don't remember exactly which way they're going. I think they're headed toward Talmekia. And what ends up happening is the ships end up getting attacked. And they're attacked by who is supposed to be a survivor of Pejite. In one of the Pejite little gunships and everything like that they have. Because like each of the different cultures have like their own design for stuff. And clearly not all technology has been lost to the world at this point in time, because we see that, like the Talmekians have tanks, and all three of these different cultures have, versions of like a gunship, and they have like different types of flying machines and stuff like that, like planes and things like that. Airships. So clearly not all technology has been lost, and some of it may have been stuff that got rediscovered later on by, other survivors down the line after the 7 days of fire throughout these last 1,000 years. Stories that were passed down and they ended up getting built and everything like that. It all depended on, who got what resources and everything like that and who ended up where. But what ends up happening is, of course, the airships are attacked by the Pegite gunship, and two of them get shot down pretty easily. One of them, that's the one that Nausicaä is on, is being shot down, and Nausicaä and Mito, along with Princess Kushana, end up actually escaping in like the the Valley of the Wind gunship that they had. They escape. They also end up finding a little barge, airplane barge that had the other hostages in it that were from the Valley of the Wind. They find them, and those guys do not so they're within the toxic jungle area, and they're like, the towing hook broke, just go on without us and everything. And Nausicaä is trying to like make them stop and like, okay, if you let us help you fly down, and then we'll find a way to fix your towing hook, and we'll get you out of here and everything like that. Throw out all of the different throw out all the rations and everything like that you have on the ship, and then we'll go and we'll do that. And they're like, no, we can't do that. And they're like trying to get Nausicaä to just leave. And Nausicaä is not having any of this. She stands up within the gunship, pilots it with her foot, for all honesty, and like takes off her mask and her helmet, and takes off her mask, and that just instantly makes them, put your mask back on, just stop, put your mask back on. And it makes them all just like instantly stop for a moment, and she's like able to just like calm them, like, just unload the barge, we'll glide down, and we'll find a way to fix your towing hook. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll do it, just please put your mask back on. And it's just like, again, we see this instant concern from the people of the Valley of the Wind for Nausicaä, for her well-being. And she, she puts her mask back on, and she's like, oh, I inhaled some of that poison, some of the pollen. And like, as soon as that's done, like, the guys are like, okay, they start throwing everything out of the cargo barge and everything like that, and they're all able to land. And what ends up happening is Kushana then kind of reveals herself. I mean, Nausicaä knew she was there, but Kushana reveals herself, and she kind of is like, I'm still in charge of this. And Nausicaa's like, you're acting like a scared little fox squirrel, which Kushana takes very much as an insult, not that I blame her. And at this point in time, this is when a bunch of the Ohm show up, and they find that, they landed in like an Ohm nest on like this little lake within the toxic jungle. And all of these Ohm show up. And Nausicaä, the Ohm don't have red eyes at this point in time, so they're not enraged at Nausicaä and her group at this exact moment. She's like made the comment that like, well, the insects are enraged because all of your ships crashed into their forest. So yeah, they're angry. But Nausicaä ends up actually kind of like talking to the Ohm, and we see this moment where the Ohm kind of have tentacles is not the correct word for it. I would say the closest thing that I have to say is like proboscis, because like, how butterflies have like the proboscis that they use to like feed out of flowers and stuff like that, and other insects have similar things. It's kind of like proboscis, but there's like a ton of them that like come out of like the Ohm's mouth area, which also seem to be where their feet are, which does not sound sanitary, but they're like feelers. Feelers, I guess, might be a better word for it as well. That like feelers that the Ohm have, and that's how kind of like they inspect different things to determine, to a degree, if it's a threat or something like that. And one of the Ohm ends up, kind of like surrounding Nausicaä in these, and we get like this little like kind of what sounds like a little bit of like a lullaby playing in the background. And Nausicaä is like, I guess, being communed with / inspected by the Ohm, I guess would be a way of putting it. And she ends up, the Ohm determined that she's not a threat, and that the people with her at the moment are not a threat. We also see Kushana, who is like right behind Nausicaä as this is happening, even though she's still holding a gun. Kushana is like terrified and like trying to like scoot away from the Ohm as much as possible. So we get to see these two, different reactions between how Nausicaä is reacting to the Ohm and how Kushana is reacting to the Ohm. After the little weird lullaby fantasy sequence ends for Nausicaä, the Ohm go off, and Nausicaä realizes that, okay, the pilot from Pegite's still alive, so she's going to go and try to help the pilot from Pegite. She pulls her glider out of the gunship, and she tells Mito, along with the others, that it's just like, okay, get the cargo barge fixed and reattached to the gunship, then fly up above the clouds. If I'm not back in an hour, go back to the valley. Return to the valley. And then, like, she just, like, gives them their orders, and then she goes. And they're like, okay, you heard the princess's orders. Mito goes over and takes the gun from Kushana. I'm assuming they, like, cuff her or whatever, because we see her later and she's in cuffs. And, you know, Nausicaä goes off and she follows where the insects are going toward where the Pejite pilot was. We find the Pejite pilot and he's kind of shooting up the bugs, and that's not a wise decision. And getting attacked by them, and Nausicaä manages to save him, but then they both end up getting dropped into this like quicksand pit where they fall down the quicksand pit. And then we kind of cut away. And we cut back to the Valley of the Wind, I believe, where we see that, you know, the giant warrior is, you know, slowly being awakened. I mean, this happens over the course of like a couple of days throughout the course of the show, or throughout the course of the movie. It's only like a couple of days, if that. Like, they have not been gone very long. But, like, we see Kurotoa come in, and, like, he's looking over the giant warrior and everything, and making snide comments and everything. And then we find, and we see Lord Yupa is actually, like, spying on them, because he explained to Mito that he's going to, like, sneak away from the valley, and then he'll sneak back in, and then, like, kind of, like, spy on what's going on. So Lord Yupa is watching this. And then Kurotoa is informed about the fact that that Kushana's fleet has been has been shot down, and that her ship was blown up. Who was the survivor that saw this? Was there some random survivor that managed to get back to Telmekia, or back to the Valley of the Wind or something? I don't remember. I don't remember. There may have been a gunship that survived. I'm not sure. But, like, that information gets back to them. And none of the soldiers, nor does Kurotoa, seem all that exceedingly concerned about that. They're like, oh, well, that's not good. Yupa is very concerned, because that means that, like, you know, Nausicaä and Mito and a bunch of the others, you know, several of the people that are his friends were there as well, and that they may have been shot down and they could be dead. And, you know, he's, you know, watching them as they interact, and they're like, you know, don't tell the people of the valley that their princess is dead. They won't like that. Their princess might be dead. So, like, they're there. And then this is when at one point in time we do have this moment where we cut above the clouds again, or I'm going back and forth a little bit, but the group that was with Nausicaä, they stay around for about 2 hours before they end up going back to the Valley of the Wind. And as I said, this is a little bit out of order, but, like, eventually it is that, you know, at the Valley of the Wind, you know, Lord Yupa is told that, you know, Mito and the others have returned, and they're waiting down by the Acid Lake, as they call it, which is this giant lake that is just filled with acid, which is bad, as is said later on in the movie. And they're in this ship that looks like a very torn up submarine that is by the acid lake. And that's where Mito and the other old men, and where Kushana is. And Kushana and Lord Yupa talk, and he's like, we will release you, but you must take the giant warrior and drown it in the lake, and then leave and go back to your own country. Because you've caused enough damage here in the Valley of the Wind already. You've killed our king. We don't know if our princess is still alive. And you've caused all of this harm already and made the jungle angry. So, you know, and this is where we get a little bit more of, like, character building on Kushana, because what happens is Kushana ends up explaining that, like, you know, you guys try to live in harmony with the forest, but, you know, what you should do is you should take the giant warrior from us, destroy us with it, and then destroy the jungle with it, and then you can rule the world. That's what I would do if I was in your shoes, and you must learn to live with a monster, because that's what I've had to do. And she, like, clicks off part of her own hand, and it's revealed that one of her arms, I think it's her left arm, is actually a prosthetic arm. And Lord Yupa figures out the insects did that, and she's like, yes, and whichever lucky man becomes my husband will see far worse. So this is implied, and this is probably something that gets explained a little bit more in the manga than what they go over in the actual movie, is that Kushana, at some point in time, probably when she was a child, was attacked by an insect, most likely an ohm, given the type of reaction she has to the ohm. Or she was attacked by an ohm or by an insect in general, and at the very least lost her left arm and possibly one of her legs, if not both of her legs, because I don't know if we ever get any indication that both of her legs are not prosthetic. I don't know if we ever get that indication, but so she has those. That's revealed there. And Lord Yupa is like, well, we don't want to be like you guys. We don't want to use the warrior. We want it gone. We don't want to deal with it. You're the one that brought all of this issue to our valley in the first place. All these problems to our valley in the first place. From there, we kind of cut away to the where we see that Nausicaä has survived. She's fallen down this pit, down the sand pit, and she's underneath. It ends up being explained by the guy who's with her, by the Pejite pilot, whose name is Asbel, and he is actually a prince of Pejite. He is the twin brother of Princess Lestel, of the princess that died. And there was actually a moment earlier on in the movie when he was trying to shoot down the Pejite, or the Talmikian ship, where Nausicaä actually like stood on top of the ship and tried to get him to stop, and he had like this flash where she reminded him of his sister. And so now we're having this moment where they're actually getting to meet, and she, tells him her name and everything. And Nausicaä is actually looking around, and she's realizing that, oh, they don't have their mask on. And she's like, how can we breathe down here? And he's like, I don't know, but the air is pure down here. And Nausicaä ends up looking around and seeing all of these different giant fossilized trees, or like petrified forests. I've been to a petrified forest. There's one either somewhere here in Nebraska or it's up in South Dakota. I don't remember. I mean, it's interesting, but it's not as interesting as one would think. For a giant petrified forest, it's not as interesting as like this giant fossilized petrified stone forest that is, that we're seeing here in Nausicaä. And she kind of goes around and she kind of figures out that, okay, this sand that I'm finding here is the same sand that's from underneath our well. And this is where she's figuring out that, oh, the forest, as it grows, it absorbs all of the toxins from the soil, and that's what gets put into the pollen. And then as the forest dies, the trees has absorbed so much of it that as they die, it purifies them. And it then purifies all of the water and the soil and everything like that. So that way it can grow anew. And that's what's underneath the forest, is like where so much of the village's water comes from. And like Nausicaa's even figured out like the topsoil in their village is poisoned. But if you dig down deeper, then you'll find the soil and sand that is not poisoned, and that is actually good for growing, and that's where the clean water comes from and everything like that. So Nausicaä is now able to put these different pieces together. And Asbel is finding this very interesting as well. And the two of them end up talking and having this, long conversation where they're just like, this is where, Asbel finds out that, that his sister is dead, unfortunately. He's like, I'm sorry that I shot down your ship. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with all of this and that you were dragged into all of this. The Talmikians showed up and they ransacked our city and they took my people hostage. They took my sister hostage and everything. And they took the giant warrior from us and all of that. And Asbel even points out the fact that, yes, Pejite had unearthed the giant warrior, but even if they had intention of using it, they weren't going to use it the way that the Talmikians were going to use it. Which, again, Nausicaä is just like, yeah, I don't believe you, kind of thing. Is kind of like that concept, and it's like, well, we need to get back to Pejite, because then maybe we can get some people from Pedjite to be able to help us or whatever. So their intention is to go to Pedjite. We also have this adorable scene where they're eating the Chico nuts or whatever that the different kids the little girls had gathered up for Nausicaä. And apparently the nuts taste horrible, which is just kind of funny. And Asbel's like, why is it everything that's supposed to be good for you tastes so bad? It's like, kids have been asking that question for a very long time. Adults have been asking that question for a very long time. It's like, okay, medical community, you make stuff that can make us so much better and everything like that. You make cough medicine and different things like that that can make us feel better. Different types of medicines that can make us, feel better in so many different ways. And yet you can't make them taste better. Why? Why is that so hard? It's like, trust me, it's medicine. I don't want to drink it very much either, but you can at least make it taste reasonable so people don't want to throw it up or so kids will actually take it. It's like, you can't, it's like that whole type of a thing. That whole concept there. Just to the medical community, please try to figure out a way to do that. Please try to find a way to make medicine taste better. Moving on. So as I said, during this time frame, we kind of cut back and forth a little bit between Nausicaä and Asbel and then what's going on in the valley. In the valley, we also find out that a bunch of the spores had actually survived because, the people of the valley hadn't been able to finish going through and actually getting rid of all the spores before the Talmekians showed up and took over. So now a bunch of those spores have spread. And they've, started to grow onto their own trees, and they've actually started to infect the trees of the valley, along with their crops and everything like that. So it's like, oh, that's not good. And what happens is, Kuratoa is like, fine, give them their little fire things and give them everything but their guns because we can't afford to lose this valley because if the valley becomes infected, then we have to leave anyway, and the giant warrior is not able to be moved yet. And what ends up happening is, so the people of the valley are running around in the forest and determining, okay, these trees are infected, this whole forest is infected, and Obaba comes out and is just like, what ends up, you need to, we need to burn the forest. It's like this forest has been our home, this valley has been our home for the past 300 years. And but the forest is gone. The forest has been infected too much. And we need to, there's nothing here that can be salvaged with it. So we just need to burn it down. And I don't know if they actually full on decide to burn it down right then and there. But I don't think that ends up happening because during the same time frame is when the people of the valley end up starting to rebel because Lord Yupa is still there and they're like, okay, we need to, try to do something because they're not going to get rid of the giant warrior. So we need to get rid of the giant warrior ourselves. And so they're like, the people of the valley start fighting back against the soldiers. And during this time frame, Kushana has actually managed to escape from the ship down by the acid lake. She's managed to escape, and she's not wearing all of her armor anymore. She still has her prosthetics, but she's making her way back to the valley. And Lord Yupa is there, and actually Lord Yupa and Meito actually have gone off in the gunship to go to try to find Nausicaä. And so that's where they are. And then he's like, well, don't do anything rash while we're gone to the other old guys. And as I said, the people of the valley start rebelling against the Talmekians and the old guys. God. The old guys end up literally going and trying to commandeer a tank, which does not go well, but they try to steal a tank. Points on that. Could have gone better. My dad used to drive a tank in the Nebraska National Guard. Or the National Guard. So yeah, connection there, I guess. I don't think he was not in the National Guard very long, and that's where he met my mom. So I have to thank the military for the fact that I exist, on many levels, because it was because of World War II that my grandparents on my mom's side actually met. So there's that. But what ends up happening is, of course, the people try to fight back against the Talmekians, and they kind of end up getting a fair amount done, and they end up actually going and retreating and hiding within the ship down by the acid lake. During this time frame, Nausicaä and Asbel have made their way to the city of Pegite, where they actually find all of these, dead bugs and everything like that, the dead insects on the way there. And they find that the city itself has been rampaged and destroyed by the Ohm and by other insects. And Asbel makes this comment of like, this was just even too big of a price to pay, even if it did get the Talmekians out of our city, and Nausicaä doesn't understand what he's talking about. And from there, they end up seeing this Pegite airship show up, and he finds out that, okay, so we get to meet, like, the mayor of Pegite is on this ship, along with a bunch of other, like, people from Pegite, a lot of women and children and stuff like that, and some soldiers from Pegite that survived. And the mayor explains that, okay, well, our intention is to attack the rest of the Talmekian army and get back the giant warrior and everything like that. And we get this whole whole big argument happening where like Nausicaa's like, but you're going to attack the people of the Valley of the Wind. That's my home and everything like that. And like, so the introductions are given there. And what ends up happening is Asbel's like, you can't possibly be planning on doing that, of using that plan. And the mayor's like, well, yeah, but it's, we have to, if we're going to get the giant warrior away from the Talmekians, we need to do this. And Nausicaa's like, what plan? And Asbel is like, the plan is to bait the insects out of the jungle and make them attack the Talmekian army. And Nausicaä, of course, does not like the concept of this, A, because it's using the jungle to try to attack someone else. B, it's because those someone else also include her people, her home. And the guy that's like the mayor of Pegite, that's just what he's called. He's not given a proper name. He's just the mayor of Pegite. It's like, well, we need to do this because it's the only way to save the world. And she's like, what do you mean saving the world? You're killing my people. And what ends up happening is, of course, they end up capturing Nausicaä. They knock Asbel out because he's against this, but they're like, okay, well, we have to do this anyway. And we end up, Nausicaä gets put into like the room full of potatoes on the Pegite ship on their way to go and try to, go and see what's going on at the Valley of the Wind and the Talmekians and everything like that. And this woman shows up, and she is revealed to be Asbel and Lastel's mother. And her and this other girl are actually go into the room where Nausicaä is. They bring Nausicaä supposedly like some food, but they're like, okay, the girl is actually going to take your place, and you're going to get out of here because we don't agree with what's going on right now, and we want to help you because you helped my daughter and you helped my son and everything. And like Nausicaä ends up hugging the woman who would probably be like the queen of Pegite if she's Lastel and Asbel's mother. Nausicaä hugs her and like apologizes for the fact that she couldn't do anything more. And the queen's like, no, we're sorry for all of the harm that our people have caused you and all of the trouble that has been caused already and everything like that. And you need to go and try and save your people. Again, different variations of like how you look at leadership. And Nausicaä, as a whole of the movie, is a very interesting way of showing these different types of leadership roles and different aspects of or different relations that a leader can have with their people, that a ruler or a prince or a princess or a king or a queen or whatever can have with their people. So we see that there. From there, Nausicaä and Asbel, or Nausicaä with Asbel's help, ends up making her way out of into the area of the ship where her glider is. And he's ready to get her to, try to help her get out. But at this point in time is when a Talmekian ship shows up and it starts attacking the Pegite ship. And, Nausicaä, Asbel basically ends up getting her on the glider and then shoving the glider out the window, or out of the cargo hatch or whatever. So she's off. At that same time is when the Valley of the Wind gunship shows up that has Mito and Lord Yupa on it. And Lord Yupa basically ends up jumping out of the gunship onto the ship itself, onto the Pegite ship that is being attacked by the Talmekians. And the Pedgites are like kind of hauled up in like part of the inside of the ship and everything, trying to keep the Talmekians away from them. And it looks like they're about ready to blow themselves up as well in order to try to fight the Talmekians. I'm like, well, that's not going to help your cause. But Lord Yupa shows up, and he just kind of like jumps onto the ship, jumps down into the ship, and just starts like slicing his way through the rest of the Talmekian soldiers that are there. They're like, "That's Lord Yupa, kill him and you'll be famous." And it's just like, yeah, good luck with that. And he just like fights his way through them and helps like save the Pedgite ship, so they don't die. So Asbel's fine, and the mother is fine, the girl that took her place is fine, and Nausicaa's even worried about them and everything like that. At this point in time, Nausicaa has made her way onto the gunship, and her and Meta are like, okay, we need to get back to the Valley of the Wind as fast as possible, and they're just like gunning it, and like just like this engine is being pushed within within like a hair's breadth of its life, pushed by the skin of its teeth to try to get back to the Valley of the Wind as fast as possible. From there, we also see back at the valley, back by where the people of the Valley of the Wind are within like this old submarine looking ship down by the Acid Lake. And Kushana has made her way back to where Kuratoa is and everything like that. And he'd had dreams of finally having being an old soldier and finally getting to, have his due. And he's just like, oh no, the princess is back. Oh, well, oh, princess, thank God you're back, type of a joke. Yeah. So we get that moment there, and they're just, so she's kind of interested in what's going on, but what ends up happening is, her and her army are down waiting by the ship as well. And she's like, well, what do you know about that ship they're hiding in? And he's like, well, it supposedly traveled all over the world, even to the stars, from what I've heard, before the 7 days of fire. Our bullets don't do anything against it, but I bet if you hit it just right. And during this time frame, she then talks to the old men that had been captured. And, one of them ends up looking at her, and they're like, you're nothing like our princess. And I mean, I don't think it's necessarily meant to be an insult. It's just supposed to be an honest to God comparison of the fact that Kushana is a very different princess than what Nausicaä is like. And they're like, and we see that comparison there as well. But then again, Talmekia is a very warlike country, as it is stated to be in the movie. So her having a much more warlike attitude about things and having a much different relationship with the insects than what Nausicaä has also makes sense for how she would end up interacting with not just the insects, but other people as well. So again, there's this like comparison there. And as is stated in various types of media, as like, not every villain thinks that they're the villain. It's like, yes, Kushana and the Talmekians are kind of the villains and the instigators of what's going on here. But from their perspective, they are trying to do what they can to try to help the people of the valley in regards to trying to like destroy the toxic jungle, and then they can find a way to like take back the earth and take it back from the insects and everything like that, even if that does involve using this giant warrior and everything. And so there's this comparison there, and one of the old guys is like, they do the thing of like, you're nothing like our princess. And, he's like, my hand, I have the same disease as what King Jill had. And, in 6 months, my hands will be as hard as rock. But our princess, Nausicaä, still loves these old hands of mine because they show the fact that I am a hard worker. And again, with Nausicaä and with her people, we don't really get this huge disconnect that she is like far and above them. She is not. She goes and finds supplies for them. She goes and helps with making repairs to things. She's, probably on almost a first name basis with almost everybody that's in the village for the most part within the Valley of the Wind. She helped bury the dead of another country that brought problems to their own country. to their own kingdom. She, helped bury them, and, she's willing to do what she needs to help other people, regardless of, the cost of her own life, as we see multiple times throughout the course of the movie. And her people know this. And her people, it's like she was raised around them. We see this in the little bit of a flashback where it's like she's not, or like even her father wasn't like above and beyond everybody else in the village. They all were very, very upset when he was said to have been dead, killed by the Talmekians and everything. So there's that. What ends up happening is during this time frame, Kushana, I guess, I don't know if she just decides that she's a little bit fed up with the way that they're talking to her, and she like sends them back to the other people in the, in the submarine type looking ship. And, we're going to, get the troops fed and everything, and we're going to attack in an hour. And that's her plan. She's going to attack the people of the Valley of the Wind, who are not doing anything against her necessarily at the moment. Yes, they're holed up in the ship, but you're the one that took their frickin' valley from them. And all of that. Coming back to Nausicaä and Meito, who are in the gunship at this point in time, they are making their way toward the Valley of the Wind. They end up, Nausicaä senses something in the wind, and they end up looking, and they see this huge mass of just like red dots moving across the landscape, and it's revealed to be all of these hundreds and thousands of ohm. Like every ohm in the jungle, in the toxic jungle, is out there making their way toward the Valley of the Wind, and their eyes are just red with rage as to what's going on. And they're trying to figure out, okay, well, what's baiting them? And they look over in the distance, and they fire a flare, and they see that there is this Pegite ship carrying this baby ohm that has been stabbed through with several metal rods and is being dangled below the ship and is clearly in pain. That is there. And what ends up happening is Nausicaä is like, okay, well, we have to get the baby ohm away from them, and we have to return the baby ohm to the herd, or else the ohm won't stop their, their stampede, and they will just destroy the Valley of the Wind, and then anything else within their, anything else that's in their way, including the people, including the Talmekians, the Valley of the Wind, the people there, everything. They will just keep going until they die. And so Nausicaä and Meito are trying to make their way over to the to this Pegite ship that has the baby ohm. Still can't figure out how the frick this Pegite ship flies. But what ends up happening is they try to shoot, or the Pegites try to shoot Nausicaä and stuff. One of them won't do it because she looks like Estelle, because Nausicaä she's wearing a Pegite dress, and she ends up is on her glider flying toward them and everything, and she told Meito to go to the valley and warn them as to what's going on about the ohm that are coming to attack, that are stampeding and everything. And during this time frame back at the valley, it is revealed that the wind has stopped. As in, there is no wind on the ocean anymore. There's no wind coming from the ocean. There's no wind in the Valley of the Wind. And they're all just like, oh no, that's not good. The wind has never stopped. There's always been wind. And like they all feel it, and like Obaba is like, oh, that's not good. All of them are realizing that's not good. Even like the children are aware that this is not a good thing, that the wind has stopped. And what ends up happening is Meito gets back to the village just in time, just right when like the Talmekians are getting ready to attack. He flies down to the gunship. They stop the fire. Kushana rushes over before everybody stops firing. She rushes over. She's not in her armor. She rushes over like, where's the princess? And the others rush over, is like, shouldn't she be in the back seat? And Meito's like, no, the princess is trying to stop the giant army, the giant horde of ohm that are on their way here to try to kill all of us. All the people from the Valley of the Wind have run into the ship and are trying to make their way to the top of the ship so that way they may have slightly better chance of surviving when the Ohm come. If they're, on top of the ship, and one of the ladies is like, if we're going to die anyway, we should die in the valley. And Mito's like, no, I still have faith in the princess. As long as she has faith, then so do I. And Kushana makes the decision of like, okay, if the Ohm were going to attack anyway, then she basically determined she's going to go and get the giant warrior. And they're like, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's not ready to be used. And she's like, well, I need to. It's our only chance of trying to survive this. So she goes to go and wake up the giant warrior. Bad idea. She goes to try to start waking up the giant warrior. During this time frame, Nausicaä has managed to cause the little Pegite ship to kind of fall, and she ends up interacting with the baby Ohm, which is very, very large. And earlier on in the movie, and I skipped over this part and I shouldn't have, but earlier on in the movie when she's passed out after her and Asbel fall into the underground petrified forest, while she's passed out, she ends up having a dream. And she has this memory of when she was little, of her and her father and her mother and some of the other people. And then them just like, going and her being around her father, like this perspective of like, when you're a child, your parents seem so much larger than life and everything like that. And like her father just seeming so much bigger than he was and everything. And we see that. And then we also see that Nausicaä, as a little girl, had at one point tried to hide a baby Ohm and, try to keep it safe and everything. She's like, it's my friend and everything like that. But the people of the valley, including her father and stuff, did not think that that was a good idea. Technically right on their part, but they're like, humans and insects cannot live together. And they take the baby Ohm from her and they take it away. And she's like, please don't kill it. It didn't do anything wrong. We don't ever find out if they actually killed the baby Ohm. I would assume that the people of the valley would be wise enough to probably not kill the baby Ohm, because if you kill a baby Ohm or kill an insect, then that's probably going to make the other insects in the forest come and try to attack you. So my thought is that most likely what happened is that they took the baby Ohm and they had someone, maybe Lord Yupa, maybe Mito, maybe someone else, take the baby Ohm back to the toxic jungle and leave it there. And return it to wherever, to the toxic jungle. I know that there's probably fan theories out there that like maybe that little baby Ohm, if it survived, is either this baby Ohm that Nausicaä ends up interacting with at the end of the movie, or that this is like the baby Ohm that ended up, maybe this baby Ohm that was her, that she had when she was like a little girl, that maybe that baby Ohm is one that grows into the giant Ohm at the beginning of the movie, or into one of the other Ohm that we see throughout the course of the movie. I'm sure that's a fan theory out there somewhere. That's a theory I've had as well. There's like, well, maybe it is the same Ohm, and that's why she can connect with it so easily, because it somewhat remembers her from when she was a kid. From when it was a baby and everything like that. But I don't know, that I don't think that's ever been specified in any additional media that Miyazaki has put out. But so that's like the flashback that Nausicaä has at one point that I kind of forgot about. But like, so then we see Nausicaä and this injured baby Ohm, and Nausicaä is injured as well because she got shot in the shoulder and she got shot in the foot, grazed in the shoulder and grazed in the foot, which still freaking hurts, by the way. And she's trying to make the baby Ohm calm down, and the baby Ohm is of course angry because it's been stabbed through with metal several times and then used as bait. So I would not be happy either. And it's kind of, riling up with anger, and it starts, bleeding all over Nausicaä, and she, like her dress goes into the blue color that is generally what's shown in the movie. Because Nausicaä is generally associated with the color blue, because most of her outfits are blue to some degree. Except for the Pegite one, which now has been dyed blue. I hate allergies. F allergies. I hate allergies. I've been coughing several times throughout this video, so I apologize for the cuts. And I'm stuffed up. Sorry. Freaking ragweed or whatever is in the air. Sorry. Yeah, I would not do well in toxic jungle. Oh, you're allergic to plants anyway. Yes. Oh, this is not helpful. But Nausicaa is trying to stop the baby Ohm from going into the acid lake, and in the process, her own foot gets shoved into the acid lake, which that scream and kind of that bit there ends up like making the baby Ohm stop. And during this whole time frame that all of this stuff has been happening, she has Tato with her. So Tato is there and he's concerned. Hi, I'm almost done. She's like, you said that 20 minutes ago. Hurry it up. And the baby Ohm kind of calms down and like kind of like inspects Nausicaa a little bit, and she's able to see that it's calmed down. And then she walks over, hobbles over to where the two Pegite guys are that have been controlling the ship. She now has like the machine gun, and she kind of like, okay, you're going to help me take this baby Ohm back to its herd so we can make the Ohm stop, and so I can save my valley. And she's like ready to fire at them. I think she actually does fire at them a little bit. They're like, okay, fine. And they, help get the baby Ohm tied back up. I don't remember if they actually managed to pull the different metal stuff out of the Ohm's body or whatever, but like they get it tied back up again in a much more appropriate way, and they're carrying it back to the village, back to where the Ohm are, herding, stampeding toward. During this time frame, Kushana has shown up. A bunch of the other Telmekian soldiers have tried to run away at this point in time. Not that I blame them. And Kushana has showed up with the giant ancient warrior that is not fully formed. And it starts, she's like, fire it, aren't you supposed to be the most evil thing that ever existed, destroy the Ohm and everything like that. And it starts firing at the Ohm. And while it has caused damage, it itself is falling apart, and it only gets off like 2, maybe 3 shots before it just like crumbles. And the thing looks like it's melting the entire time, and it looks like it's in pain the entire time, in all honesty, if the thing can feel pain, but it's dead now. Kushana managed to get away. At this point in time, the Ohm have almost reached them, and the people of the Valley of the Wind are watching as all of this is happening. And Nausicaä is carried in with the baby Ohm in front of the herd and put down in front of the herd. And she just like stands there resolute with the baby Ohm and just like, Ohm, I've brought your baby back. The Ohm just stampede. They hit Nausicaä and the baby Ohm, and Nausicaä just gets flung into the air. And everybody is watching all of this, and they're just like, oh no, princess, because they see what happened to her. And, like Kushana is kind of being attacked at this point, or Kushana and Kuratoa are kind of like dealing with the Ohm at this point as well. And like they're being attacked, and like the Ohm are just kind of like rushing past the ship that the Valley of the Wind is on. And, rushing past them and everything. And then everything just kind of stops. Just stops. And we cut away, and we see the Pegite airship showing back up, and Lord Yupa and Asbel and the others are on that, and we see that they've survived, and they're looking down at where all of the Ohm are, and like at one point in time we saw this like ripple within the Ohm of like them going from like red-eyed to the blue, calmer, clearer mind, and just like rippling through the herd of the Ohm. And we see in the middle of this herd that there is the baby Ohm in this little clearing, and there is the baby Ohm, and then there's Nausicaä. And the Ohm, one of the other Ohm, starts to like inspect Nausicaä, and like again the feelers come out, proboscis, whatever you want to call them. They're not tentacles, I don't know what to call them, but they come out and they pick up Nausicaä and Tato, and a bunch of the other Ohms start bringing up their feelers as well, and they start healing her. And at this point, we look over at the Valley of the Wind people, and they're just like, they think that their princess is dead because, like, she just got knocked, several hundred feet into the air by an Ohm, landed, and isn't moving. So, yeah, they're all just like, we see them all just like crying and just like, oh God, oh no. like this is just like so horrible, like, you know, so much that has happened to them already, and like this is just horrible as well. And we see that like Kuratoa is like kind of pinned underneath one of the different ohm at one point in time, and like Kushana is there as well. So we see them, and they're just kind of like all witnessing what's going on. And then we see that, you know, the ohm are healing Nausicaä, and like the, you know, Asbel and Lord Yupa are witnessing this from the Pejite airship as well. And they're watching this as Nausicaä is being healed. Her shoulder wound from the bullet and her leg wound from being shot and the acid lake are all being healed by the ohm, along with probably any other injuries that she sustained with being knocked into the air by the ohm, are being healed. And even like the little baby ohm is there trying to help, although they can't do as much. But, you know, a bunch of the ohm there are like, you know, healing Nausicaä. And she wakes up and she stands up on this field of gold dressed in blue. And, you know, Obaba, and at this point in time, Obaba and the rest of the valley, people of the valley, have figured out that the ohm are healing her, and that they're like so happy about this. And Obaba is like, the ohm are such kind creatures. They're so, you know, such amazing creatures and everything like that. And I mean, the people of the valley, they were respectful of the ohm to begin with. Yes, they would use their shells to make tools, but that's not being disrespectful to them. That's being material that is provided to you that the thing that originally had the material does not need anymore. And, you know, Obaba asked the children to explain to her what they see, and they're like, oh, the princess is wearing a blue dress that I've never seen before, and it looks like she's walking on a field of gold. And that's where, you know, Obaba is like, oh, he will return clad in blue and surrounded by fields of gold. And it's like, you know, this like prophecy being, you know, coming to fruition and everything like that about this like guy from 1,000 years ago or whatever. We never get an answer as to who he is, or at least in the movie we never get an answer. I'm assuming there might be more about him in the manga, possibly. At some point I will read the Nausicaä, the Valley of the Wind manga. I just haven't done that yet. Brenda, pretty girl. She's a good girl. You're so good girl. I love you. She's like, hurry up. Hurry up and pet me. And what ends up happening is, of course, you know, Nausicaä is healed, and then she is, you know, set down by the ohm, and, you know, the ohms start to, you know, recede and return back to the forest and everything, back to the jungle. And Nausicaä is reunited with the people from the valley, and they're just like all overjoyed and ecstatic that she's okay. And, you know, she's reunited with Asbel, who is very happy. You know, like Dirty Dancing picks her up and like spins her around, which is adorable. And we get through all of that, and even Kushana and Kuratoa seem to be happy that she's okay, because Kushana had made the comment earlier on that she's like, well, if Nausicaä manages to make it back from the middle of the jungle, then I'd like to get to know her. Hi. And so we see a bunch of that stuff, and the ohm are retreating and leaving and everything, and they see that the wind has returned because Nausicaa's glider is back on the wind. So the wind has returned. And then basically like the end credit sequence just kind of wraps up some stuff. We see that Kushana and the rest of the Talmekians head back to Talmekia after seemingly been able to like calm down stuff with the Valley of the Wind and Pejite. People from Pejite seem to be going back to Pejite. We see that the people from the Valley of the Wind are working on getting their forest rebuilt, regrown after they had to burn it and chop it down and everything like that. And Nausicaä probably using some of the information that she knows from growing her own plants and everything like that, from growing the stuff from the toxic jungle, that she's probably using that to help them with making sure that the forest is better taken care of at that point in time, that their forest is better taken care of. And from there, we also see that like Lord Yupa and Asbel seem to go and start doing journeys on their own. And we do see moments that show that the toxic jungle is still there. It's not like the toxic jungle magically disappeared. It's still there, and the ohm are still there. and we still see times where Nausicaa's flying around and everything like that. And then the last shot of the movie is we cut back down to underneath the toxic jungle, where we see all of the different plants and everything like that, or the petrified forest and everything like that. And down there is where Nausicaa's little helmet still is. And out of it, there must have been a seed somewhere on her helmet, and it's growing out of the, starting to grow on the bottom of the toxic jungle and the purified area of it, to show that, things are going to move forward and that humanity has a chance now to keep going. That the earth has a better chance to keep going. So we kind of get that there. And I like how they finished that up. So that is the end of Nausicaä, but first I have to go over the cast listing, baby girl. Here, I'll slide this way so you can look in the video too. See? Look, Brenda is a Brenda. Yes, you're a Brenda. You're my Brenda. She's like, yep, here I am. So the cast listing in regards to this, since I'm going mainly off of the Disney version that came out in 2005, because that is one that I am most familiar with. As I said, some of the earlier Studio Ghibli movies do have other previous versions that were released at different points in time. But in this one, we have Alison Lohman as Nausicaä. We have Patrick Stewart as Lord Yupa. We have Shia LaBeouf as Asbel. We have Uma Thurman as Kushana. We have Chris Sarandon, who is as Kuratoa. Chris Sarandon is actually the guy that played Prince Humperdinck. Hi. You want to come up? Brenda, up, 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 up. Come on, up, 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 up. Good girl. Here we go. Up a little. See, here. Tilt the camera down. There. Now they can see you better. Chris Sarandon is a guy that played Prince Humperdinck in The Princess Bride, and he's also the one that plays Jack Skellington in Nightmare Before Christmas. Then we have Edward James Olmos, who plays Mito. He's just been in so many different things that I can't remember exactly what he's been in off the top of my head. We have Tress MacNeille as Obaba, who you would remember from Simpsons and Futurama, and the Animaniacs, and so many other stuff with so many of the different stuff. We also have Frank Welker and Jeff Bennett in there as well. Fun bit, Mark Hamill plays the mayor of Pegite, so he's played by Luke Skywalker. And also Mark Hamill will later, in the next movie that I will be reviewing for Ghibli, that is Castle in the Sky, who plays Muska, who is the main villain in Castle in the Sky. So that's what I have. That's what I have for this one for Nausicaä, the Valley of the Wind. Brenda has given her 2 cents, and I am done with this. So I thank you for watching the video. These ones are going to be long videos because there's a lot that happens in these movies that I love to talk about. So I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye!